What's up, everybody? It's Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, and on this channel, we break down the trials and cases you care most about so you can understand how the American civil and criminal justice system works. And we try to make sure you understand what your rights are in every situation, which is why we try to walk you through the entire legal process while also answering your insightful questions along the way. And while it's not legal advice, it's always exciting. So buckle up for another episode of The Lawyer You Know.
Hi, everyone. Pete Sardis back for The Lawyer You Know. Elizabeth Holmes' bond hearing has been scheduled. This is going to be the hearing that determines whether or not she will stay free during the time that her appeal is pending. We've got that. We've also got another pleading that the government filed. Obviously, it's still this fight with her trying to leave the country, apparently. I'll let you know all the details here in a second. But before that, as always, if you enjoyed the episode, give me a thumbs up. If you've enjoyed the series and you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing that now. And as always, leave me your questions and comments down below. All right, so let's start with the government's most recent filing. The government on Wednesday filed another motion asking the judge to preclude Elizabeth Holmes from having a supersedious bond while she is pending the result of her appeal. Of course, they're still talking about the fact that they believe Elizabeth Holmes tried to flee the country by purchasing a one-way ticket to Mexico back in January of 2022. Now, this pleading does in fact acknowledge that there was discussion between the prosecutor and the defense about her ticket and that it was canceled after the lawyers had a chance to talk. The second thing that the government has to eat some egg on their face is the fact that they now recognize that they did in fact misstate that Billy Evans, who is Elizabeth Holmes' partner and husband now, at the time had gone to Mexico on that trip and then came back 3 weeks later via South Africa. In fact, the records now reflect that Elizabeth Holmes' partner, Billy, went down to Mexico for the wedding by flight and then drove back across the border a few days later. So he was not gone for 3 months. I'll tell you, this particular set of facts is very concerning. I don't like to throw around the term prosecutorial misconduct because at the end of the day, I truly believe that the vast majority of U.S. attorneys are ethical people. I truly believe that if you're going to be a U.S. attorney, that there is some sort of ethos that you have inside of you that you want to work towards justice. It's not about winning and losing. It's truly about making sure that the interests of justice are served. But right now, with all of these hearings and all of these motions just getting thrown around, and the allegations are either just sloppy, and I'm hoping that it's just sloppy, or they're material misrepresentations to the court. Now, if it's just sloppy, I'm not happy with the U.S. attorneys because, again, U.S. attorneys are supposed to be accurate. They do the job of representing the United States government in front of our federal courts. So you expect whatever the U.S. attorney's office files to be beyond reproach. Obviously, we haven't seen that in this particular set of facts, and it looks like there were some representations made that were, let's just call them like they are, false, especially with the motion asking that Elizabeth Holmes be taken into custody because she bought the one-way ticket without notifying the government, which obviously the government knew about it, and now they admit that there were discussions between them and the defense. And this obviously all came out when the defense responded to the government's motion. So that being said, the government has filed a motion to ask the court to preclude Elizabeth Holmes from having a supersedious bond. Let's talk about that for a second. The hearing is going to be on March 16th, I believe, and I'll follow that for you as things happen. But here's the basic gist. In federal court, you do not have the right to remain out on bond pending the outcome of your appeal. The more common practice is that you are taken into custody and you serve your time in prison. And if by chance the appellate courts do rule in your favor, then of course you come back, you'll have a new trial, a new hearing, new evidence will be presented to the court. Whatever the Court of Appeals decides in their ruling has to happen in order for you to get a fair and impartial trial. Now, that being said, there are some opportunities for a defendant to stay out on bond. The most obvious one is when the term of incarceration is a shorter time frame than the time it will take to get through the appellate process. For example, let's presume that Elizabeth Holmes would have gotten a sentence of 1 year or 18 months, which is what they were asking for initially in the defendant's sentencing memorandum. If she would have gotten that kind of time, the court would have been obligated to at least consider the implications about having someone in custody for a time that is so short that even if they win, they will be out of custody before the appellate process is done. And there is a fundamental fairness issue to be considered there. So if that was the case, Elizabeth Holmes had a very, very good chance of staying out on bond. Now, there are other times where a supersedeas bond is appropriate. For example, if there is a novel issue, and that's a technical term for some new concept that is being tested, and the court believes that the appellate court has not really considered a specific issue before, and if the appellate court rules against the decisions that the trial court made, it would definitely require either a new trial or could potentially, overturn the entire conviction. At that point, the court is obligated to consider whether or not they should allow someone to remain out on bond. Again, remember, this is about fundamental fairness, and it would be unfair to have somebody sitting in custody considering an issue that the appellate courts have not clearly ruled on in the past. So, for example, for your average stuff, drugs, money laundering, guns, fraud, things of that nature, the vast majority of the issues that are raised have been considered numerous times by the federal appellate courts. So most of the time, the judges pretty much know what the ruling might be or should be. Now, not to say that people don't win appeals. It does, in fact, happen. Defendants do win appeals. It happens, not often, but it does happen. So considering if the kind of the facts of this particular Elizabeth Holmes saga, if the court considers any novel issues, Judge Davila may allow her to stay out on bond. Now, let's talk about the third thing. If Judge Davila believes that Elizabeth Holmes has more likely than not, a probability that she will overturn the conviction, or that there will be a new trial or something that requires the verdict to be overturned, then the court can allow Elizabeth Holmes to stay out on bond pending the outcome of that appeal. That now is an issue of fact for the court, because the court would have to make a decision that something that the court ruled on very well may be viewed differently by the appellate court, and that different view would overturn the conviction. And if that's the case, again, based on fundamental fairness, the court could allow her to stay out on bond. If this case were not in California, if this case were in the 11th Circuit here in Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, basically Georgia, the southern east United States, I could almost guarantee you that the chances of Elizabeth Holmes staying out on bond pending appeal with a 10+ year prison sentence over her head based on these facts would have been a no-brainer. She's going to jail, and that's just the way it's going to be. And if her sentence is overturned, we'll deal with it later. But again, this is a far more conservative jurisdiction here in the 11th Circuit than in the 9th Circuit in California. So that being said, I can never guarantee what a court is going to do in that circuit, because it is far more defendant friendly than what we would see in some other places throughout the country, some more conservative jurisdictions. But there is still a very good chance that Elizabeth Holmes goes to jail, goes to prison in April of 2023, because the court has already given her a self-surrender date. If the court was going to consider a supersedious bond. I would have expected some additional discussions or a motion a little sooner in time, especially if during the hearing the court says, you know what, if you're going to file a motion for supersedious, let's get that on the table so we can get it, get it on the books. But at this point, without that motion, I will set a report date for April 2023, whatever the case may be. But we didn't have that. So my gut says Elizabeth Holmes is probably reporting for prison in April. But again, I could be wrong. The government is obviously fighting this thing tooth and nail, maybe a little too overzealously, if I may, be so bold as to say it that way. You file motions that the defense has now moved to strike after their pleadings come in with all of these additional facts that appear to now be accurate. The government then files another pleading to keep Elizabeth Holmes from getting a supersedious bond, admitting or acknowledging some of the factual discrepancies that are, I think, the biggest hits that the government had in their initial motion. This is kind of a problem for them. So I can see at this point the judge is not going to be happy, especially in such a high-profile case where this topic is now, part of the, a part of media and part of the news. So he's got to deal with all that, that fallout. And yes, believe it or not, judges do consider media as one of the issues when they make decisions or how they act, because at the end of the day, they know the world is watching. Not to say that Judge Davila would make a different decision if the media wasn't watching him, but now he's got to have a hearing because everybody's like, what's going on here? Initially, the government says that she tried to flee the country back in January of 22 and didn't tell the government anything about it. Then the defense responds and says, wait a minute, that's just not true. Not only did we tell them about it, we had this full discussion by email and everything was apparently fine. And by the way, her husband, Billy Evans, didn't go to Mexico and come back 3 weeks later via South Africa. He came back by car from Mexico. Not that should matter regardless, but so now then we have another pleading and the government's like, all right, mea culpa, we were wrong, but you still should not let her out on supersedious bond. That whole back and forth is a little dirty. Not something really I would have expected to see from United States attorneys. So a little disappointed from my perspective as a federal practitioner that's going on. But what are your thoughts? What do you guys think now that you've seen this kind of play out? Do you think the government just kind of, they found an opportunity to make beef, made some allegations that kind of slapped them in the face, and now they've got to, kind of clean it up? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to go in front of a federal judge and have the judge look at you and say, so everything you filed was wrong, right? They've at least filed a pleading to clean up some of those discrepancies, even though it is, in fact, more defense-sided, that the defense was more accurate in their representation than the government. So you tell me what your thoughts are. Do you think the judge is going to be more lenient to Elizabeth Holmes now that all this back and forth has happened and all these misrepresentations have occurred? Do you think the court is going to be annoyed at the government and send a little message saying, don't do this crap? I don't want to see this garbage. If you're not going to be accurate and know what you're filing, there's going to be repercussions to you. Or do you think the judge is just going to say, look, forget all this stuff. Motions are all denied, but Elizabeth Holmes, you are not going to be out on supersedious bond. You will self-surrender in April of 2023. Regardless, we're going to know sometime in March on the 16th or thereafter. I will keep you all posted as things happen. Let me know your thoughts, and we'll talk to you all soon.